Hey there, IoTeX community. We have a really special interview with Ramesh Ramadas, the chair of the Blockchain and IoT Standards Working Group in the IEEE. Good morning, Ramesh. Please introduce yourself.
Morning, Ramesh here. I lead the IEEE Blockchain Initiative, and we have a committee focusing on standards within the Blockchain Initiative, and I oversee the standards activity. And we have over, I think, 50 working groups. So there's a few focusing on blockchain and IoT. So today, I guess we will spend some time talking about the blockchain and IoT standards working groups.
Absolutely. So, IoTeX was just elected the vice chair along with you to facilitate some of these activities within the blockchain working group. But for those that are brand new, the IEEE name is well known in the technology industry. But for those that don't know what the IEEE is and what the Standards Association within the IEEE is, can you just explain what it is and what are its goals?
Yeah, sure. IEEE is like I and 3EEE. So it stands for Institute for of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. And it's actually one of the largest professional technical organizations in the world. It's very global. It's in 160 countries, we have 420,000 members, close to 500,000 members worldwide. And it has a long history. It goes all the way back to 1884,
Wow.
back from Edison and Tesla, those times where electricity was becoming the main thing in the society. So the mission of IEEE is to advance technology and innovation for the benefit of humanity. So if you look at the IEEE logo, they have a tagline. It says "Advanced technology for the benefit of humanity." So it's actually a nonprofit. Anyone can actually join. It's a network. It's a big, huge network, and there's actually within the IEEE. There's a division called IEEE Standards Association. That's the unit that mainly focuses on developing global standards. And the goal of this IEEE Standards Association is to provide like a neutral platform for, to bring experts from all over the world to be able to come and, work on standards and come to a consensus on the standards. And that's the goal. For example, blockchain, as I said, we have several working groups and we have experts from all over the world working on developing standards, like companies, startups, and even individual experts on this topic. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a really great consortium, as you mentioned, of corporations, startups, and individuals developing technology and developing standards to push forward humanity. I love the humanity essence of the IEEE. So for someone that's kind of unfamiliar with the standardization process, how do standards actually push forward humanity? And what are some examples of standards maybe that we use on a daily basis that are maybe more familiar to people?
Yeah, so standards are developed to lower or even eliminate barriers, technical barriers. And basically when you eliminate technical barriers or you eliminate or lower barriers, what happens is you can actually enable global trade, and even the economic growth. So if there's a new emerging technology, you need standards for enabling, for example, in the case of blockchain, we're talking about interoperability. So in the blockchain space, lack of interoperability is a technical barrier. So you have all these islands of blockchains where they're not connected. So you need bridges for transactions to happen, to move data from one to other. So this is where standards are important. Like, in fact, IEEE has a working group focusing on, there's actually a published standard, P2418.2, focusing on data format. And then there's also a working group focusing on cross-chain interoperability. So bottom line, standards help with, with the adoption and the growth of new technology by lowering the technical barriers.
Mm-hmm. Even things like shipping crates and Wi-Fi and 4G, 5G, cellular connectivity. These are all standards that just maybe talk to us about how does a standard like Wi-Fi become developed?
Correct. So I'll give you an example. So Wi-Fi, as we know, it doesn't matter where you are in this world. All you need is a password to get on online. And so Wi-Fi is actually an IEEE standard, IEEE 802.11, and it's actually it's pretty universal. It doesn't matter which country you are. All you need is, you get the password and you're online. We're not carrying any hardware, or there's no different software. It's just universal. So this is the beauty of having a universal single standard. It becomes very seamless for consumers. Okay, I'll give you another example where you would see it actually could be a pain. In fact, if you know the electrical sockets, different countries have different sockets, and Europe and China, Asia versus the US, and so what happens is you have to carry these adapters with you. Sometimes when you forget, it becomes a headache, and you got to go look for it. So this is basically this is a scenario where you have multiple standards, right? It's not single, you have multiple standards. So what happens is it becomes painful, or even we end up paying for it. Customers, we end up buying those adapters, and it costs us money when there are multiple standards. So this, you can see the difference in Wi-Fi being a single standard. It's just so seamless for us, and you have like simple as this electrical socket where you have multiple standards, and you have to spend money, buy the this adapter,
Converters,
and
yeah.
of course, so you got to carry those things with you. It's a pain. Sometimes it has happened to me. Sometimes I forget to take it, and then you go to the hotel front desk. Hey, do you have the adapter? And then if not, then you have to go buy it, look for a store. These are practical difficulties that we face. And just to give you an example, but this thing applies to other fields as well. When you have a universal standard versus have multiple standards or no. So
definitely, I think the electrical socket example is amazing because if you think about every electrical socket as a blockchain, right? If you don't have the converter, the cross-chain bridge to make them talk to each other, then all your tools and all your applications on that side can't get the power that they need. But yeah, Wi-Fi is the global universal standard. So regardless of what phone you use, all these manufacturers are building in the Wi-Fi standard, the Bluetooth standard, all into their devices, which are kind of globally usable and universal, right? So how many total standards does the IEEE kind of cover? And I know there are a lot of like the very deeply technical ones, but even, there's other organizations like ISO that do more like the shipping crate sizing and all these other global standards that really interoperate our world, right?
Yeah, so IEEE focuses on many areas like software architecture to hardware, electrical, like Wi-Fi is a hardware, and so there's a whole range of topics. And ISO, and ISO, of course, ITU, and there are other standards organizations as well. So in fact, they all have different models for developing standards. In fact, if you look at ISO model, what happens is to be able to participate in the ISO working group, you have to go through a system, like through the country. Every country, it's like a country-based membership, right? You have to be delegated by your, national standards body in your country to participate. So it's not like anybody can go in and participate in the ISO working group. And IEEE is actually an open platform. You can be a member, non-member. It's a pretty neutral, open platform. You can actually participate. If you're an expert or if you're interested on this topic, if there is an existing working group, you can actually start joining the meetings. Or if there's no working group, you can actually create one as well. It's a pretty open platform. Whereas if you compare it to other standards organizations, it's not that easy for anyone to go and start, developing standards or be active in the space. So that's why I got, involved with IEEE, because it's pretty open for anyone to be active in the, standard space and connect with other experts and companies working in the space. Yeah.
Absolutely. So many global standards out there, and it's really exciting now to see standardization reaching into the footprint of blockchain too. So, switching gears over more to P2418, which you're the chair of. So what is P2418? We know it's a framework for the use of blockchain in Internet of Things, kind of covers both permissioned and permissionless blockchains. But from your own words, what is P2418 standard, and what does it seek to achieve?
Yeah, so 2418.1 is a working group focusing mainly on the use of blockchain for IoT. So we are actually looking at developing a common framework for like, how you would use blockchain in IoT, the implementation of blockchain in IoT, as well as the communication interaction between the blockchain and IoT. So, in fact, currently the 2418.1 is an individual-based working group, meaning like anyone interested can actually start joining the meetings and participate in the meetings.
Yeah, and it's really exciting, that Xin is joining you to kind of lead this group as the vice chair. What does that mean exactly? Like, how do you guys work with these individual members to develop this standard? And maybe talk a little bit about the history and also the future timeline.
Yeah, so it's, we have like over a dozen members who are participating in this working group. And in fact, I'm the chair, and Zinzin Fan from IoTeX is the vice chair. The goal is we have a draft right now, and our goal is to have this draft completed by end of this year, 2021. And then it goes through a process. There's a process. It goes through a ballot, and then the IEEE standards board would approve the standard. So that might happen like, early part of next year.
Mm-hmm. So what exactly is in this document? So, we know the general framework for how blockchain is used in IoT. Are we talking about, the data structures, the transaction structures, how different blockchains talk to each other? What's the scope of 2418.1?
So, see, the use of blockchain and IoT can be in a few areas. One is, of course, the security. You can use blockchain to secure IoT devices. Also for privacy, could be identity management. Blockchain could be used for managing identity of devices, different devices, mm-hmm. and also data management. Could be another use case is monetization of data, like microtransactions. Could be between different IoT devices. So we have, in fact, several working groups focusing on different topics that I just mentioned. For example, P2144 series is focused on data management. And then we also have IEEE P2958 is focused on decentralized identity specifically for blockchain and IoT. So the 2418.1, our goal is to keep it as a common framework of like how these, the architecture level, how these interactions would happen, and how different stakeholders would look at this architecture. And there's a software architecture that we follow in IEEE. So we're using the same kind of document to look at this problem, blockchain and IoT problem.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. One way that we've been looking at blockchain, the intersection of blockchain and IoT for a while, right, is how can blockchain impact the Internet of Things? But also there's an interesting design space about how the Internet of Things can impact blockchain. But it seems like this one is more focused on how blockchain is going to fit into even traditional IoT systems today. Or is there an element also of, creating brand new decentralized systems?
Yeah, like you mentioned, this working group is focused on how blockchain would fit into IoT. Mm-hmm. In fact, the decentralized. There are many use cases. Of course, the decentralized architecture enabled by blockchain is one of the we call it trustless architecture, right? So that's something that would be part of the standards that we look at. So the common framework that we are talking about would address that, the trustless architecture enabled by the decentralized, could be an autonomous system that's enabled by combining blockchain and IoT.
Definitely. Blockchain and IoT are very synergistic technologies, right? A lot of the things that the IoT is currently plagued with, things like security, privacy, interoperability, these kind of built in as native benefits into blockchain. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you feel that blockchain is going to be impacting the IoT, maybe in the near term, maybe the first next couple of years, but also the long term? What's the IoT? What is blockchain going to do for IoT in the near term and the long term?
Yeah, in fact, if you look at the enterprise space, a lot of companies are already using. They have a pilot or somewhere on production. They're using blockchain for supply chains. And a lot of these supply chain applications use IoT devices. for track and trace and, for provenance. So that's the near term, which near term or even something that's ongoing right now is the use of blockchain and IoT in supply chain applications. So it's mainly for improving the efficiency of the existing supply chains. All right, that's reducing the paperwork
Hmm.
involved, or even you have fragmented multiple systems. So if you use blockchain, it could be a single shared ledger instead of having a handful of systems where fragmented information is stored.
Hmm.
So that's that plus the when we have physical goods and you have to track it in the physical world, it typically involves an IoT device on it. It could be an RFID tag, or it could be even so that's where the IoT part comes in, where you
Hmm.
have the connection of blockchain to physical goods, right? Tracking physical goods.
Hmm. Definitely. Supply chain, I think, is one of the best examples of an area where standards can help, right? Because there's so many across the value chain, there's so many multi-stakeholder processes where data can be authorized and needs to be revoked and everything in between, right? A lot of people think about interoperability in the supply chain, meaning which companies are partnering with each other. But at the technical layer beneath it, you have to make sure all of the messages, all the transmissions, all of the invoices, the payments are all kind of interoperable, or else you run into these bottlenecks where this intermediary needs to bridge the gap between the two things that can't talk to each other. So is that kind of a good way of saying, in the long term, finding a standard not only for these businesses to talk to each other, but also for the systems that they use to talk to each other? That's really the goal of standards in blockchain and IoT.
Right. So, like you mentioned about long term. Yeah. In fact,
Hmm.
there are many blockchains right now. So you really need like a system of systems kind of view where you have standards that enable you know uh, data portability of data from different systems. And if you're talking about IoT devices, the IoT device could be connected to multiple blockchains, correct? It could be uh, could be feeding data into one blockchain, and maybe there could be oracles in the architecture. So yeah, standards are very important. Data format, in fact, and the protocol, and these are very important. That's why we are working on developing standards. And you also mentioned about long term. So as you know, right now, automation and AI has been growing at a rapid pace, especially the last since the COVID hit. Things have really gone to the digital transformation has happened quite rapidly in the last 18 months or so. Now, blockchain, we talked about IoT, and blockchain in combination with IoT and AI, it's going to, you will see that, it would enable autonomous machine to machine communication, microtransactions, in a decentralized manner without an
Hmm.
intermediate party. So it's coming, and now definitely we need standards to basically help with the interoperability of all these different systems, and in general adoption of this technology.
Absolutely. I think we here at Iotex, we definitely share the same view about that stack, the tech stack you mentioned around blockchain, secure hardware, and AI, right? And each one of them plays a very important role. Of course, secure hardware, captures, tamper-proof readings about the real world and can be a source of truth, proving facts to smart contracts on the blockchain, which is kind of the root of trust, right? Tamper-proof foundation. But AI is really the one that's going to extract the insights and the value from all this information built on top of this trusted foundation. Yeah, that's a really another interesting layer of standards that or technology that are going to really enable a lot of this innovation going forward. But as far as other industries where you think blockchain and IoT is going to make kind of a big impact, some of the areas that are very popular within our community are things like smart homes, definitely renewable energy, automotive. Where do you see the next big leap in the blockchain and IoT industry? A lot of it is focused on asset tracking and supply chain, which is a natural fit to the ledger format of blockchains. But where do you see the next evolution going forward?
Yeah. So, in fact, as you mentioned, currently supply chain is one of the, biggest use cases that we hear a lot about. But there are, blockchain is like technology that has a horizontal impact. So some technologies have vertical impact just in one area, but
Right.
blockchain has impact in many, many areas, right? I mean, like, for example, like you mentioned about the energy. In IEEE, we have a project focusing on, trading, peer-to-peer trading of energy. So it's an area that I think it's also going to be, right now we don't see a lot, but there are some projects happening here and there, but I think this is going to have a big impact I'm talking about next, 5 to 10 years kind of time frame where, the renewable energy and then the peer-to-peer trading of renewable energy and, that's going to be, important.
We see a lot of attention, especially with the enterprise blockchain space or the permission blockchain space, right? Just creating consortiums of, enterprises that want to work closer together, but didn't really have the means to trust each other and able to do this. Like, I think the permissioned blockchain space, the requirements are much simpler. It's just about creating trust so we can do business. But on the permissionless side of things, I think that's really creating a different way of decentralizing these markets, even taking away some of these enterprises from the equation, at least the ones that are serving as intermediaries, right? What do you think about that balance of permission versus permissionless today? And where do you see the fits?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is going to be, they both will coexist, it's not like one is going to win the other. Because the choice really depends on, do you want transparency or confidentiality, right? So there's always a trade-off between these things, like, and do you need tokens in your application or there are no tokens in your application? So, it totally depends. So we will see, just like today, right? We see both, a lot of experimentation happening on the public blockchains, as you be seeing, like, last year was like DeFi, and this year we see a lot of experiments happening on NFT, and experiments are constantly happening. It seems like every year, every other year, there's a new experiment happening in the space. And in terms of the private blockchains or permissioned blockchains, in fact, Forbes published like top 50 or Forbes 50 blockchain. In fact, there's a lot of big companies have solutions based on blockchain. So it's become a real thing. It's not just on a hype. So bottom line, I think they both will coexist, and depending on what your requirements are, you would end up using that blockchain. For example, in a private blockchain, token is not a topic. It's just about creating like a consortium or private chain with a handful of companies that just want to use one shared ledger and just shared information. There's not. In fact, I mean, they pay membership fees. That's how they build it and maintain the chain. Whereas in the public permissionless blockchain, you have the token that takes care of the incentives and the economic model for keeping the system going. So it totally depends on what your requirements are in terms of deciding where you want to implement your IoT system, whether it's in a permissioned or permissionless.
Definitely. And I think the world has so many different applications of blockchain, right? Some of them are going to go towards permission, some of them are going towards permissionless. But even like understanding all the full scope through these standardization efforts, right? Where does permission blockchain fit in? Where does permissionless blockchain fit in? And how do those standards, interoperating with existing IoT systems, which one makes the most sense? It's all kind of efforts that are driven by this consortium-based work, right? No single company is going to define how this works. It's definitely a a merging of the mind power of those corporations, startups, and individuals, even academics, as you shared throughout this call, right? And I think,
yeah, that's why we have a, we 2418.1, we have a mix, as I said earlier, we have a mix of startups, big companies, and researchers. So we want to get views from, different experts. So when we develop this standard, it's useful for everybody, not just like a narrow segment.
Definitely. And if there's anyone out there listening that is a big corporation or a startup or an individual wants to learn more, how do people get involved in IEEE standards, and specifically this blockchain for IoT standard that we're discussing?
Well, the easiest way is to just we can put the link in your podcast. There's a we have a website, dedicated landing page for 2418.1, and there's actually email address there. You could just email us, and we would add you to the mailing list for the meetings, upcoming meetings.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. And you were mentioning a lot of different experiments in blockchain with DeFi and with social. When do you think, I personally don't think IoT has hit the mainstream of blockchain yet. Maybe very soon is going to be the next big thing. But what do you think are the steps that are required in order for people to start experiencing kind of blockchain and IoT? What are the mental hurdles?
There were several experiments, that they were done by, in fact, I think your company has a camera, correct, based on secured by blockchain. And there were some projects by a dozen different companies we looked at where they're using blockchain for connecting different appliances and, to the, blockchain and IoT architecture. So the thing for this to take off, I think there has to be an economic model where it really makes sense for using blockchain, and there's going to be some additional cost involved in adding blockchain to the existing consumer product. So, this is probably where we're getting stuck, where, we're adding blockchain. For example, in the case of camera, it makes sense, but it may not make sense in some other cases. But even in the case of camera, but there's going to be some additional expense incurred for securing the camera. Now, are the customers willing to pay for it? Now, this is where I think we'd have to solve that the cost issue for the adoption to hit mainstream.
Yeah, a lot of also behavioral change, I think, will need to happen. Getting people to change behavior, I think, is one of the hardest things in the world these days. But I think with the built-in economics and the ability to have transparent execution of those economics through technology, blockchain, I think, is a perfect platform to kind of introduce new models and definitely experiment with new intersections of blockchain and IoT. But, Ramesh, really amazing time to talk to you today. Thank you so much for spending over 30 minutes chatting with us. Is there anything else you want our community to know in addition to the things we talked about today?
Well, I would like to invite your community to join the working group if they're interested in actively participating in the standards development. As I said, it's an open platform, so you're welcome to join the meetings and participate or just observe, or you can even contribute. So, I invite everyone to check out the link for the 2418.1 and get in touch with us if you're interested.
Definitely. You heard Ramesh. Look out for the link in the comments below. But thank you so much again for your time, and we'll be sure to provide updates to this community about the progression of this standard going forward. Thanks for your time, Ramesh.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.